The only person executed in the state of Wyoming since the reinstatement of the capital punishment was Mark Hopkinson. Following the 1977 bombing of attorney Vincent Vehar's home in Evanston, which also claimed the lives of Vehar's wife Beverly and son John, Hopkinson was found guilty. Later, while he was being held during Vehar's murder trial, he was charged with planning the 1979 assassination of Jeffrey Green. Sometime in 1975, Mark Hopkinson made his way back to his birthplace in southwest Wyoming's Bridger Valley. He had previously moved out of the valley to attend the University of Arizona on a football scholarship. He was found guilty in 1971 of providing controlled substances while he was away. He was released from federal prison and soon after made a reappearance in Wyoming. Attorney Vincent Vehar took on a rather combative role in two court cases in which Mr. Hopkinson became involved towards the end of 1975. The Hopkinsons and the Royces got into a fight about water rights in the first incident. When Mark's father, Joe Hopkinson, started laying the groundwork for a trailer court in 1974, he also covered the ditch that supplied water to the Royces. After consulting with Mr. Vehar, the Royces proceeded to sue Joe Hopkinson. Not long after the family won their case in court, Mark Hopkinson went back to the valley. In addition to taking charge of the trailer court's development, Mark also tried to get the ruling overturned on appeal. When Mark went to see the Royces in April of 1976, he asked them if they could settle together without the help of lawyers. Mark threatened to build the trailer court in a way that would cause them a significant deal of hardship when the Royces objected. When Mark returned to the Royces on May 6, 1976, he attacked Frank Royce, who was 55 years old. Following Mark's separation from Frank, Joe, Mark's father, showed up on the scene with a hammer. Then the two men pounded on Frank Royce together. When the argument eventually ended, the Royces spoke with Mr. Vehar and made the decision to discuss filing charges with the county attorney. However, the county attorney was Jim Phillips, who Mark had employed to challenge the initial ruling. In his official role, Mr. Phillips declined to press charges in this case. Meanwhile, a rivalry between Hopkinson and Vehar had started to develop. Joe Hopkinson had approached Mr. Vehar's client, the Fort Bridger Sewage and Water Board, in 1975 to inquire about the possibility of having his proposed trailer park annexed to the sewage district. He wanted to pay the $100 first hookup cost to connect to the district as normal. The board was given a petition to increase the fee that was signed by 95% of the district's members before any formal action could be taken. The board held multiple public meetings to decide on the appropriate fee for connecting the trailer court. Following protracted talks between the district attorney, Mr. Vehar, and Mark's attorney, Mr. Phillips, a contract was signed on March 13, 1976, annexing the Hopkinson land to the district and mandating the payment of a $300 connection fee per trailer. After the connection was made, Mark declared he would not be paying the agreed-upon amount. He threatened several board members during the ensuing conflict, in which the board attempted to make Mark pay. As a result, on January 28, 1977, Mr. Vehar filed a lawsuit on behalf of the board. In addition to requesting that Mark pay the money owed under the contract, the filed case sought $50,000 in exemplary damages owing to the threats made against the board members. In 1976, Mark initially employed Jeff Green as a carpenter for a variety of tasks. Jeff then introduced Mark to his pals, Jamie Heisel and Mike Hickey, who was an acknowledged alcoholic. Jeff committed multiple burglaries and larceny in the region with his guys. A 15-year-old girl named Kelly Wycuse, who had spent the night at Jamie Heisel's house, gave a statement to the authorities that led to the man's arrest in June 1976 for Mary Jane possession. Jamie and Mike Hickey planned to kill her as payback. As per their deal, on June 27, 1976, Hickey picked Kelly up and drove her to a remote location in the countryside where he was supposed to meet Heisel. As Heisel did not show up, Hickey hit Kelly over the head with a rock, killing her because he had already told Kelly about their plan to kill her. He then buried the body after chopping off her privates to show Heisel as evidence that the job was completed. Initially, in late 1976, Harold James Taylor was approached by Mark Hopkinson about doing a job for him. As they spoke, Hopkinson revealed that the position required him to work over a man in Evanston, Wyoming. A deal was reached whereby Mr. Taylor promised to complete the task in return for $200. Next, Hopkinson showed Taylor pictures of the intended victim, Vincent Vehar, describing him as an Evanston-based lawyer. Mark went back to Taylor before the task could be completed and said that his companions wanted Vincent Vehar dead. Taylor accepted this but increased his asking price to $600. On December 19, 1976, he received the money. Taylor declared shortly afterwards that he would not kill Vincent Vehar. Mark spoke with Kenny Neer, a former sewer board president, in March or April of 1977. Mark gave Neer around $2,000 during their conversation in exchange for testimony that the Hopkinsons were being treated unfairly by the sewer board. Mr. Neer turned down the proposal. Mark Hopkinson then looked to Mike Hickey and Jeff Green for suggestions on how to eliminate Vincent Vehar. There were other ideas put forth, but none of them were implemented. Additionally, it was around this time that Mark Hopkinson discovered that Kelly had been killed by Mike Hickey the summer before. During a traffic stop in Utah on April 4, 1977, Jeff Green was found in possession of a bomb after he was detected speeding while operating Mark Hopkinson's vehicle. He was headed to Arizona to detonate the explosives in George Mariscal's vehicle on Hopkinson's behalf. After learning about Green's situation, Mark and Hickey drove to Utah to help Green out on bail. Hopkinson declined to speak with Jeff Green about his plans for Vincent Vehar anymore. Over the following 4 months, Hopkinson questioned Mike Hickey about different plans to assassinate Vincent Vehar or William Royce. If he took care of one of these two men, Hopkinson promised Hickey $2,000 plus costs plus assistance in covering up Kelly's murder. To arrange the murder's execution, Hopkinson and Hickey traveled to a number of different local regions. By the end of July, Hopkinson had finally come to the conclusion that Vehar was the one who needed to be killed and that the Vehar home's basement window would be the best place to do it. During the first week of August, Hopkinson was notified that Vehar was going to depose him in connection with the lawsuit filed by the sewer board on August 9, 1977. When Hopkinson came across Hickey on Saturday, August 6 at 6 p.m., he gave the order for him to bomb the Vehar residence that evening. After that, Hickey proceeded to the neighborhood tavern, where he remained until around 1:30 a.m. He went to the countryside to have an intimate encounter with a woman he had met at the pub. Later that afternoon, he went back to the pub at 2:30 a.m. to get his car. After driving home while quite inebriated, he found that his girl roommate had not returned. At last, he made up his mind to go perform the task as Hopkinson had requested. At 2:45 a.m., he was spotted by a highway patrolman who was looking into an accident on the interstate traveling toward Evanston, which was about 30 miles away. When he got to Evanston, he looked around the Vehar house. He checked to make sure everything was secure, then hurled the bomb through the basement window and left. It was around 3:35 a.m. when the Vehar house exploded. Hickey took in a hitchhiker on his way back to the valley. According to the hitchhiker's testimony, this had to have happened between 3:30 and 4 a.m. Hickey found his female friend at around 4:30 a.m., and the two of them headed back home. Following the bombing of Vehar, Hopkinson determined it would be best if he and Hickey remained anonymous. Hickey consequently saw very little of Hopkinson and never received the $2,000 that was mutually agreed upon. During the fall, Hickey traveled to California. While he was gone, things started to fall apart. The police questioned James Heisel, and he revealed Kelly's murder to them as leverage. Hickey had led Heisel to the location of the body, thus Heisel was able to lead the authorities to the burial spot. Heisel also connected Green and Hickey to a number of the smaller break-ins. In California, the authorities located Hickey and questioned him about his role in these crimes. He replied that he had no connection, but he would soon return to Wyoming and they could talk then. He was accused of killing Kelly after returning to the state. Hopkinson devised a scheme whereby Hickey, Green, and Hopkinson would all fabricate tales that implicated Heisel in order to defend Hickey. This ultimately resulted in the indictment of Heisel for Kelly's murder and the dismissal of the murder charges against Hickey. However, in the spring of 1978, Hickey was convicted of burglary and sentenced to prison. Before and during Jamie Heisel's trial for Kelly's murder in July 1978, Jeff Green finally snapped and revealed the truth. He initially accused Hickey and Hopkinson of being involved in the Vehar case. Later, he confessed that his claims implicating Heisel were false and that Hickey had actually committed the crime. He did so out of concern that Heisel may be executed. Green also conveyed his concerns about the possible consequences of his betrayal of Hopkinson. Green's testimony resulted in Heisel's charges being dropped. Shortly after, word of Green's testimony made its way to the headlines. Hopkinson made a promise to Green's sister that he would get Jeff at this point. In April 1977, Green attempted to plant a bomb in Mariscal's automobile, leading to federal charges against Hopkinson and Hickey, who were prosecuted in March 1979 in the United States District Court in Cheyenne. Additionally, Jennifer Larchick was assured by Mark Hopkinson that he would get Jeff Green after Jeff had testified against him during the trial. Following the trial, Hopkinson, rather than Hickey, was found guilty, given a prison sentence, and placed in the federal minimum security facility located in Lompoc, California. Hopkinson had unrestricted access to the phone there. After arriving, he started making a lot of phone calls. He placed 114 calls between April 8 and May 29, 1979, a span of 51 days. He made arrangements of Hap Russell, a former roommate from Salt Lake City, to pay him a visit in Lompoc. Russell claimed that on the ensuing visit, they plotted to suborn false testimony related to the Mariscal conviction. However, the state contended that what was actually happening was the preparation of Jeff Green's murder. Additionally, Hopkinson repeatedly called Jennifer Larchick and pleaded with her to provide Hap Russell a picture of Jeff Green. Hap Russell approached Jennifer to persuade her to send the picture after she objected to this. At last she consented, and on April 24, 1979, she sent Russell a picture taken from a high school yearbook. Jennifer and Hopkinson didn't speak for a while until May 16. Hap, in the meantime, had reached out to John Suesata, a Salt Lake City resident with an unsavory reputation. In the beginning of May 1979, Hopkinson started calling a former friend, Christy King. He asked her a number of times whether she would be willing to conceal some money for him in her bank account, and she said yes. Mark contacted Jennifer Larchick on May 16th and inquired about Jeff Green's location. On the 17th, he called back with the same question. Jeff Green had traveled to Iowa to attend his grandmother's burial. After returning with his mother on the night of the 17th, he vanished with two men early on the 18th. On May 19, Mark Hopkinson called Jennifer Larchick again to ask about Jeff Green. 2 days prior to the grand jury's inquiry into the Vehar bombing being scheduled to begin, Jeff Green's disfigured body was discovered on May 20. Mark Hopkinson gave Jennifer his final call later that day. She informed him that Jeff was gone. $15,000 appeared in Christy King's bank account on May 21st. Christy King received a call the following day from a man claiming to be Joe. When Christy replied that she hadn't received the $20,000 in her bank account, he grew agitated. Then he said he would meet her at the airport so he would receive the amount that she did see in her bank account. On May 25, Mark Hopkinson contacted Christy again. This time, she told him she was going to give the money back to his mother and demanded to know what was going on, to which Mark answered, "No, send it back to Scott." Following this, Christy delivered 3 cashier's checks for $5,000 each via registered mail to Scott, Mark's brother. When Mike Hickey was called to appear before the county grand jury in late May 1979, He broke down and admitted to both the Vehar explosion and Kelly's murder. As part of a plea deal, Hickey consented to give the state's evidence against Mark Hopkinson in the Vehar case in exchange for a 20-year sentence for Kelly's murder. After that, Mark Hopkinson was charged with a number of offenses, including killing Jeff Green and the Vehars, and on September 3, 1979, he was put on trial. After his move for an overruled judgment and acquittal was made, he chose not to provide any evidence on his own side and to rest at the conclusion of the state's testimony. The jury was instructed to consider whether the death penalty ought to be applied to the 4 murder convictions after returning a verdict of guilt on all 6 counts. The jury recommended life in prison for each of the 3 Vehar offenses, but death for Green's murder. In accordance with that suggestion, the district court sentenced Mark Hopkinson to 3 consecutive terms of life imprisonment for the Vehar homicides, to death for the Green murder, and 2 terms of 7.5 to 10 years imprisonment to be served concurrently for the conspiracy convictions. Until his execution, Hopkinson fiercely maintained his innocence despite being found guilty of all 4 crimes. Despite pleas from opponents of the death penalty, such as Amnesty International, Wyoming Governor Mike Sullivan declined to commute or pardon Hopkinson. He was put to death at the Wyoming State Penitentiary by lethal injection. His last meal was pizza, and he enjoyed it with his mother and other relatives. Hopkinson's final words, which continue to emphasize his innocence, were, "They have killed an innocent man." He declined to have witnesses present at his execution. Therefore, they were brought in later to examine his remains and confirm that the sentence had been carried out. On January 22, 1992, Hopkinson was pronounced dead at 12:57 a.m. Since the capital sentence was reintroduced in the United States in 1976, this was the 159th execution to take place there. Please hit that subscribe button if you like my channel. See you next time. Bye bye.